Hey Abigail, good morning. It's Miss Tracy. It's about 8 o'clock. I am going to do lesson 108, 109 for you. So, in the video, which I encourage you to watch all the way when you have a minute, it's only 12 minutes long, so it's not super long. It actually teaches you how to look at things that are cubed and factor them. That's what we're factoring perfect cubes. So you remember when we learned how to factor perfect squares. So if we had, let's say, x squared minus 4, right? That was a perfect square because it had a minus sign. So we could factor it as x minus 2, x plus 2. And we didn't have to worry about, figuring out a middle term. We knew the pattern. The pattern was always going to be a minus and plus, and it would be the unsquared version of this and the unsquared version of this. The digits were the same for both. We just changed the operation in the middle. And that's how we would factor it, right? We don't have to think about it too hard. There's a format. The same is true for cubes, for perfect cubes. There is a format. But we know with perfect cubes, or we know with cubes, that with 3 digits, you're going to end up with positives and negatives that you have to deal with. So there's a form for that as well to handle it. So let's do here's an easy perfect cube. X cubed minus 8, right? Which is just 2 cubed, right? So what we would do is we would look at the operation here. And there's 2 different forms. Let me do the first form. Form 1 is when your operation is a plus sign. So that would equal form 1. So with form 1, we would factor it like this. We would, first of all, uncube everything and get the cube root of it, right? So the cube root of x, that'd be x to the cubed, and the cube root of 8 would be 2 cubed, right? So that's the cubic form of these. It's the same value, but it's just uncubed. So we have to do that first. That's our cubed root for form 1. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take these 2 things and we're going to drop them into form 1. So we take the operation that is in the perfect cube the way it is for our binomial in the front. And it's just going to be the uncubed form the way it is. So the first term plus the second term. So that would be x plus 2. We're just taking what's inside the parenthesis and putting it here. Now, for the rest of it, what it's multiplied against, this is going to be a trinomial. And you're going to have the first term minus the first term squared, minus the first term times the second term, plus the second term squared. That is form 1. And it's always that way. When there's a plus sign in a perfect cube, it's always this format. So the first term squared would be x squared minus the first times the second would be 2x, and then the second one squared would be 4. And that is the way that you would factor it. Easy peasy. The second form is when you have the minus sign. So x cubed minus 8 would be form 2. And all we're going to do is take the minus sign that's in here. Because it's using a minus sign, we're just going to move it over. We're going to swap places with the plus and the minus sign. That is the entire difference between form 1 and form 2. So again, we uncube it. We find the cube root, which would be x cubed and 2 cubed. That's the cubic root. And we're just going to follow this pattern. First minus the second, so x minus 2, and then you have the first term squared plus the first term times the second term plus the second term squared. That's it. These values are not going to change. X squared plus 2x plus 4. The only thing that's different is where the minus sign is located. When the minus sign is here, it's form 2 and it's in the binomial. When there is no minus sign in the original cube, then this is a plus sign, and the first operation in the trinomial is the minus sign. That's it. It's the only difference. The math otherwise is the same. So if you take a screenshot or write this down in your cover somewhere, your notes, that is exactly what we're doing for all of the rest of these problems in Lesson 108. We're uncubing each term, and then we're putting it into its proper format. That's it. That's all it is. So let's look at the first one. So, which form do we use with subtraction of cubes? That is the second form. And if you want, you can remember it like this. Remember when you were first learning about math? The first thing you learned to do with math was add. You learned to add things together. After you learned how to add, the second thing you learned was subtraction. So first we learned to add, second we learned to subtract, right? Think of it in those terms. We learn to add first, we learn to subtract second, and that will tell you which form this is. And we learn to subtract second, so subtraction is the second form. I like to use little things like that to help me remember the order of things. So our cubed form here is going to be the uncubed of these. So 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. So that's going to be 4. And then it'll be p squared. And then we have 9 divided by 3. That would be a to the third power. Cubed minus x and then y to the fourth power cubed. Because if you multiply this times that, you get 6. This times that, you get 9. And you cube this, you get 64. Same thing here. 3 times 1 is 3, and 3 times 4 is 12. So we know that that is the cubed form. The factored form is going to be what we just did a minute ago. This is subtraction, so it is going to be minus here, plus, and we drop in our terms. So we take this one the way it is, 4p2a3 xy4. Then we're going to square this here. So I like to just write it out to the side twice. And then I can multiply 4 and 4, that's 16. PP, that's going to be P4. And AA is A6. All right, now we just write these two together. 4p2a3xy4. Okay, first thing times the second, or first term times the second term. And then the third term is this one squared. So that would be x squared y to the 8th. And that's the answer. Alrighty. So that's what we want to do. We want to put in the cubed form, the form that we're using, which because the 1 is the plus sign, 2 is the minus sign, because we learned to add first, then we learned to subtract. So if it's subtraction here, it's the second form. Then we uncube each term, and then we follow our pattern. First thing, second thing, or first term, second term, first squared, first times the second, second squared. That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing for these problems. Next problem. All right. This is addition. So the first thing we learn is addition. So it's the first form. The cubed form of this, we would say 27 is 3 times 3 times 3. So it's going to be 3. This is a squared p to the fourth. And if you check your work, 3 cubed is 27. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 4 is 12. Okay? Plus, and then this would just be y cubed. This is what tells us how to factor everything else. So we write it just the way it is the first time, and then we start doing the factoring here. So this is going to be first thing squared minus, because we have to have one minus sign in there somewhere. And if it's not here, then it's the very next operation. Then first thing times the second thing, or I keep saying thing, it's the first term times the second term plus the second term squared. So 3a squared p4 times 3a squared p4, that gives us 9a to the fourth p to the eighth. Minus first times the second plus second one squared. I don't have to write that out. I can do that one right there just like that. That's it. That is all you're doing for all of these problems. It's not hard. It just takes time to go through all of them. All right, let's look at this one. So addition. I don't think that's the right question. It says, which form do we take with addition? But this is subtraction. So I think I'm going to check this right quick just to see. Yeah, it should have been subtraction. Basically, it should say, what form do we take with this problem? So that's what that is. And obviously, those are the wrong answers. Okay, so just match the number to whatever that is. And I'm going to fix that in the pod before I depart. Glory grace. Excuse me. I'm sleepy. I don't know why. Maybe math is just not as exciting as I thought it was. Imagine that. Hang on, I gotta get some coffee. Good coffee. All right. So, yeah, you would use this number here for that. Cubed form of this, I'm going to write it out. You've got 8x12z6 minus m3y9, right? So the cubed form of that would be 2x to the fourth z squared cubed minus my to the third cubed. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 2 is 6. I need to make that look more like a 2. And this more like a z. 3 there and 9 there. So that's right. So subtraction goes in here. 2x for z2 minus my3. So the rest of this is plus because we've already used our minus. So first thing squared, 2 times 2 is 4. x4 and x4 is x8. z2 and z2 is z4. Plus. First thing times the second thing, 2x4, z2, my3. These are pretty easy. Unless you have the same variables, you're basically just squishing them together, right? Plus, this one squared is going to be m squared y to the 6th. Dunsies. You see, this takes no time. You just have to be able to, and you can write it down, you just have to be able to cube, right? Cube and uncube. And then square for this part. Not hard. Let's just go through this and knock these out. We got one more. This one's not so bad. M6y9 minus z to the 6th. Which form do we take with addition? We don't care because this is subtraction. So we're going to, I think I just copied and pasted that question, I think is what I did. So I'll fix all of those. M squared, y to the third power, z squared to the third power. All right, so it is form 2 because we got a minus sign. So that minus sign lives here. M2y cubed, z squared. Now everything else is plus because we've already used our minus sign. So that's going to be m to the 4th, y to the 6th, plus m squared, y to the 3rd, z squared, plus z to the 4th. Easy peasy. Next. And that's it. That's the last one for lesson 108. All right, lesson 109. So lesson 109 is just more on fractional exponents. So we're just doing some more fractional exponents. And all we're doing here is we're multiplying. So we're squaring these. So what we have here, this is going to be m to the 1/2 plus a to the 1/2. And it's squared, so we can write it again. M to the 1/2 plus a to the 1/2. And we multiply. M times m to the 1/2, that's going to be 1/2 plus 1/2. So it's going to be 2 over 2. So that's just going to be m. That first term is just m. Then we do the same thing here. We've got m to the 1/2 times a to the 1/2. All right, so now our other term is going to be the same thing. A times m to the 1/2. So m to the 1/2, a to the 1/2. And then this is going to be a to the 1/2 times a to the 1/2. That's going to be 2 over 2. It's going to be plus a. So it's going to be m plus 2 of these, and I'm going to write this in alphabetical order. That's it. That's all that is. You're just multiplying, and when you multiply exponents, we add them. That's it. Not a hard. I'm going to double check and make sure that it is in alphabetical order for you. M to a. So exponent and then the fraction, 1 over 2. M exponent fraction 1 over 2. And this would just be a. Double check that one. Yeah. All right. So it is in alphabetical order. Next problem. That's all we're doing. That is all we are doing this whole lesson. Z 1/2 plus p to the 1/3 squared. So we write it again. All right. Now, you don't necessarily have to write it out like this. You can just square it in your head if you can visualize the first one times the last one and the last one times the first one. If you can do that in your head, then you don't have to write it out. For me, writing it out helps me to see it better. So half and half becomes a whole. So the first term is z. And then we have z. I'm going to put it in alphabetical order. So that would be z and 1/2 times p and 1/3. And we do that again, z and 1/2. So there's going to be 2 of them. And that's going to be p and 1/3, z and 1/2. All right, that's a z. That's a z. And then you have p 1/3 times p 1/3. That's going to be p to the 2/3. That's going to be your answer. All right, this next one, is cubed. So we're going to write it 3 times. 3x to the 1/4, y to the 1/2, m. 3x to the 1/4, y to the 1/2, m. 3x to the 1/4, y to the 1/2, m. All right, that's that 3 times. 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. And then x to the 1/4, x to the 1/4, so that's x to the 3/4. And you have y to the 1/2, y to the 1/2, y to the 1/2. That's y 3/2. And we have m, that's m cubed. So we would just put that in alphabetical order. That would be the answer. Easy peasy. So these are not hard. These are skills you already have. You're not learning anything new. You're just applying what you already know to something a little bit more complex. So I do not have a problem helping you breeze through these because you're not learning a new skill. You're just doing it a little bit harder form of the problem. All right, this is all we're doing. So this would be 1/4, and 1/4 would be 2/4. So we would reduce that to 1/2. Right? Actually, I'm going to go ahead and write that out just so you can see it. Be 2/4 plus, we have x. We're going to have 2 of these because x and y, they're duplicates. So it'd be 1/4, 1/4, and this would be y 2/4. The only thing you would do differently would be reduce the fraction to 1/2. This would stay the same because there's 2 of them. Reduce the fraction again. That would be your answer. One more problem and we're done with this lesson. How cool is that? All right, so this is basically the same problem as this one. It's just that this is now negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase this so I don't have to rewrite the whole thing again. And I'm going to make this negative. That's the only difference. So now this becomes the same. This is going to be the same answer. 1/2, right? We've already done it and reduced it. This one is going to be, you're going to have plus. There's going to be 2 of them because you have x and 1/4 times negative 1/4. You have y and negative times the positive. So there's 2 of them exactly alike. So you're going to have x and 1/4, y and negative 1/4. And plus y and y. Negative times a negative is a positive. So you're going to have positive 2/4, which would be, oh no, you wouldn't either, because they're being added, not multiplied. So that's going to be plus. So it's going to be negative. So it's going to be y negative 2/4. So it'd be a negative 1/2 when we reduce it. That's the only difference. That is the only difference. And that's the last problem. So that's it. I'm going to double check to make sure that that is right. X exponent 1/2, 2x exponent fraction 1/4, y exponent fraction negative 1/4, and then y exponent fraction negative 1/2. And that's right. We did it right. Okay. That's it. You're done with lesson 109, and I'll see you in the next video, sweetheart.